What is Ben's hope? That's a question we want to ask and explore today on Providence Threads, and we have the best person to help us answer that in Krista Mason, the director of Ben's Hope on the north side of Holland.
Thanks, Toby.
Krista, I'm so pleased to have you here. We've known each other for quite some time and have traded beautiful stories back and forth. Today, the reason why we wanted to have you on here is in our community, we're talking about the Good Samaritan story. And we won't flesh that all out, but in the Good Samaritan story, you have two characters who very visibly pass by somebody in need. But it's the stranger, the person that you would never expect, who comes to the aid and gives care. So who is your neighbor? Who's the stranger? How does all of that come together? And I thought, this would be a beautiful conversation with Ben's Hope. So for some people who may not know about Benjamin's Hope on the north side of Holland, could you just give us a 30,000 flyover and how did it start?
How did it start?
What's going on there? Yeah.
So Ben's Hope is inspired by my son, Ben. A lot of our church community have known Ben for many years. He's 29 years old and quite profoundly affected by autism. And I think as Ben was growing up and Dave and I were praying about, dreaming about what his future would look like as a person profoundly affected by disability, honestly, our hearts kind of broke as we researched and visited, what happens after the school bus stops coming. And I think that was really the seed of God planting a vision for all-inclusive community where people with intellectual and developmental disabilities would thrive and have belonging and purpose. So Ben's Hope is a beautiful 52-acre campus, and we have a church plant, which is wildly inclusive.
Yes. If you've not been there, you need to go worship there on a Sunday night.
It's quite wonderful. And also have residential housing for men and women, adults with autism. And Ben lives there, and he's got a full and beautiful life of belonging. And I think really God used the need that Ben had that was unique to inspire something that is really beautiful.
How old is Ben's Hope now?
Yeah, so we opened 12 years ago.
12 years ago.
Yeah.
So I want to jump right in,
Yep.
and maybe this isn't even a fair question, but I need to ask it, especially with the story of the Good Samaritan.
Yep.
It's kind of tough that the people in that story that Jesus uses are like, these are people who should know better, right? But they have their own reasons why they don't engage. Here's the question. How have you seen in this journey, whether it's community individuals, how they may have maybe stepped over and walked at our side? But as we've talked before too, the Jericho Road is not a robust road where you can go to the other side. You're like stepping over, so you're engaged. How have you seen some of that in your journey?
Yeah. Well, I will say, I think as humans, often what is unfamiliar to us makes us uncomfortable, sometimes scared. And I think sometimes, we're a very polite society. And so sometimes I think our way of stepping over with a person who has significant difference or disability could look like pretending you're invisible. Not, we talk about this a lot at Ben's Hope. Dignity-based language. Ben is a person who's not traditionally verbal, and so often people will talk to him as though he's a toddler. And it strips dignity. I am sure it comes from a good heart, but I think there's lots of ways that when we're moving in and among people with difference, that we can be mindful of respecting dignity that is really being a good Samaritan, right? It's respecting that you are an image bearer.
Yes.
Even if you bear that image in a different way than I do.
So you've done this for us here before, but you have beautiful training on just how do we do this with dignity. So if anybody's listening today, that would be something that's available. And I'd say come to Ben's Hope and take a look. I want to protect names and places and stories and all that. But you and I were kind of talking right before this too, and just something recently about engagement. Can you even speak to that? Like there's phrases and there's things that just happen on a daily occurrence.
Right. So being respectful.
Being respectful.
We have
No names, otherwise we'll bleep them out.
a lovely person who is in need of hospitalization, right? And so part of what our role with them is helping them seek hospitalization. And sometimes that means we're interacting with a social worker or someone at a hospital. So in a conversation this afternoon, today, I'm on the call with a wonderful person from some local hospital. And the comment was, we don't have a bed for a person like her.
A person like
her.
Yeah.
Right?
That we can use better words.
Yeah, we can. We can. And sometimes I think it's becoming comfortable. There's nothing shameful about disability. We all have differences, right? And my son's differences are, not the same as your son's probably, but I think becoming comfortable that part of living out our regard for humanity and the way I think Jesus looks at us is just being comfortable with difference and not stigmatizing it, separating it.
So let's transition from like how you've seen some people step over, and let's do the more hopeful piece.
Yes.
There's this Good Samaritan. He's the least likely that should be stopping to help out, right? The enemy, a Samaritan in Jewish terms was like their dogs, right? And yet he's the one who serves and helps. Can you tell me maybe some stories of where you've been surprised, where you've seen the Good Samaritan show up at Ben's Hope, like the least expected, the surprise, like all of a sudden, whoa, never saw that coming. Do you have some of those stories?
I do have some stories. I'll tell you one story. This is a beautiful story. So, we talk a lot about respecting the dignity, intelligence, and value of all humans. And sometimes that takes a lot of creativity, right? When a person has a different way of moving or expressing themselves. So we had a gentleman years ago who worked at Ben's Hope, facilities guy. Like buildings, not as much humans, right? And one of the men that lives at Ben's Hope has an amazing gift for noticing when the light bulbs are out. He notices far before any of us. He wanted to be part of the facilities team that changes light bulbs. And some of our ceilings are, 24 feet high. So that involves a big ladder. And so there was some creativity that went in from my facilities guy. And he thought, all right, how could I do this with him? And those two men went together to the hardware store and they bought this big, long PCV, what's that plastic pipe called? PVC pipe that would fit a light bulb. And the way these two guys worked it out is, my gentleman that lives at Ben's Hope stands at the bottom, he puts the light bulb in, and the facilities guy goes up and reaches up and replaces the light bulb. Like, it's a beautiful picture of co-laboring, right? Co-laboring in that case for light bulbs or co-laboring for the kingdom. We see that all the time. People who are saying, maybe efficiency isn't our highest value. My value is that you feel valued and you and I are doing something
participating
together. Yeah. So that's a story.
I love that.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we like to talk about here is being on mission all the time. And some people feel like, I can't go to China.
Sure.
I can't go do this thing.
Right.
Being on mission all the time is simply that story.
It is.
It's seeing the person in front of you.
It's really, what is God placing right in front of me today?
Yep.
Right?
Where's my circle of influence?
Yeah. Right
Who
in
am I
my
bumping
little
into?
place in Holland, Michigan, right?
How are you seeing mission being lived out every day on Ben's Hope?
Ben's Hope.
We don't have days and days to talk. But
I would say the big, kind of superstars of Ben's Hope are the men and women who work there, as well as the men and women who live there. Our staff are called sidekicks.
Yeah, I love that name.
Yep, because we, in our industry, often they'll say residential aid, which just didn't feel dignified, right? But we like sidekick is mutual. You need me, I need you. And so our sidekicks often are people who just feel deeply missionally drawn to being part of life with the men and women who live there. So I live in one of the most privileged places in the world that I get to see that lived out
Yeah.
every single day.
Talk to like a
Yeah.
typical day of one of these
Yeah.
sidekicks. How are they serving? How are they coming alongside?
Right, right. Well, it depends. It's kind of like a hospital shift staff. So let's imagine, that your first shift, you're getting there at 6 in the morning, you're helping get breakfast together, you're helping the men or the women that live in the house where you work get ready for their day. Always thinking through the lens of doing with, not for. Again, another way to ensure that we don't strip
Yep.
dignity, but you're really just walking alongside them to help them live life to the fullest. So, I think a sidekick who is thinking through the lens of the dignity of the person that they're working with gets it right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
That has become a phrase. Javen Groningen in town
Mhm.
has worked a lot with that of not to, not for, with.
With.
How do you teach that with your sidekicks?
Right. We model it, I would say, is probably the best way of teaching it because often, and when you're in the helping professions, sometimes there's an assumption that if I'm going to provide care support for you, I'm going to do for you.
Yeah.
So often it's a matter of just shifting the paradigm a little bit
Yeah.
by identifying it, with language, but modeling what it looks like. So, like for my son, Ben, he's really good at unloading the dishwasher. Now,
Sign them up. Come on over.
right, and it respects his dignity not to jump in and intercept that. Or perhaps it's, picking out clothing. It's sometimes also adjusting, what our expectations are
Yeah.
and thinking of the higher value of a person growing in independence and being valued.
To do that paradigm shift,
Yep,
that requires us to step back a
it
little,
does.
right?
It
Take a
does.
pause
Right.
because our West Michigan Dutch,
Yep.
we value efficiency, right? And getting the job done well and quickly. And
Yep.
so speak a little bit more like a paradigm shift, you model it, but there's got to be some work done up here.
So I would say the way that we train around this was captured in something we call the Ben's Hope Way. We used to use that phrase often, kind of to identify when we get something right or maybe we miss the mark. And years ago, our board president challenged us and he said, define it, put words to it. And so we workshopped it together and now we train around it to the question you're asking. And the words are committed to loving God and others. We fiercely respect the dignity, intelligence, and value of all humans. We are creative, courageous, and committed to excellence. Through the love of Christ, we live the abundant life together.
I'm sold.
So that value statement, we call it kind of like our DNA.
Yeah.
We train around it. We hold one another accountable around it. When we miss the mark, it's usually around one of those things,
Yeah.
respecting the dignity, intelligence, and value. I think the hard work of putting language to that has helped it like kind of seep into our bones.
Mm-hmm.
So
As you kind of share that vision
Yeah.
statement, that what I'm also seeing is here's an enemy, a Samaritan coming up to a Jew that you went to intercept and deal with. And yet fiercely
respect.
I'm living this out. Here's a fellow human being
Yeah.
in need.
Yes.
I'm going to care for them, even if it's going to cost me. It's
That's
going to
right.
slow me down.
Right.
My schedule and my agenda is not getting done.
There might be sacrificing of a variety of different things. And even the statement of all humans, it isn't all humans that agree with me
Good for our political season.
or believe exactly what I believe.
Yeah.
So we've had some pretty fierce conversations as a Christian organization. How do we live out our call? What does that mean if we say I respect the dignity, intelligence, and value of all humans? What does that look like?
Yeah.
So it's challenged us, sometimes pierces a little bit when you don't get it right, but also gives us, I think, our kind of true north to stay in the rails that God set for us, right?
Talk to me a little bit about somebody who's never been to Ben's Hope before. Driving on Riley Street and coming into the campus. What could people expect?
Can I pretend it's summer?
Yes. At least spring. At least spring.
Okay, so
It's summer.
beautiful spring. So you would turn on and off Riley, and there's a produce stand to your right, and you might stop and pick up some tomatoes or buy a beautiful piece of soap made by the men and women. Then you wind back a little further, and there's a white fence in front of a beautiful red barn and alpacas out in the pasture. You might bring kids or grandkids or a neighbor and visit the bunnies and goats. Our barn is open to the community. There's a playground, beautiful trail that goes around the 52 acres now. And then beyond that is our what we call the gathering place.
Yep.
I think we maybe Hope got that name first, but we borrowed it. So that's our kind of hub of activity. The Church of Ben's Hope meets there on Sunday nights, and Monday through Friday, we've got all kinds of programming that serves the broad community. And then beyond that is a neighborhood. And there's 6, almost soon 8. We're building 2 new homes.
When are those going to be done?
They will be done midsummer
Okay.
this year. So that's going to allow us to serve an additional 12 people residentially.
Beautiful.
But that's just a beautiful neighborhood. So neighbors, come and walk and ride their bikes. People are welcome to come out whenever
So
they want.
People are always welcome on the
Always
campus.
welcome. It's an open campus.
Okay.
Yep.
And I would just want to put an invitation in and challenge out to some people who have not been there to go there. Again,
Yep.
I think this story, Jesus is teaching us, do we truly have eyes
Yes. Yeah.
to see all of humanity?
Yes.
Not just who we naturally gravitate to, but how do we see all of humanity and how do we participate by being a blessing and encouragement? What are some simple ways? You took us through a campus tour, but what if somebody like, I want to know more about this? You have houses coming ready, so you're probably going to need some new sidekicks and
We're
such.
going to be hiring probably 30 or more staff.
How many staff do you have on campus then?
30 now.
130 staff on campus.
We do well, not at any one.
Right, but
Right, but Benjamin's Hope is serving people with fairly high support needs. So often at a 1-to-1, 1-to-2 staff ratio. So that takes a pretty full staff. So there'll be hiring opportunities. As you said, come to church on a Sunday night. It's
come ready to worship.
Yeah, come ready
and
to worship.
free abandon.
Yep. It is delightful. It is eclectic, joyful, uninhibited. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying sometimes if you haven't spent a lot of time among a worshiping setting like this, it might be a little intimidating, but give it a chance.
That's
It's pretty wonderful.
It is.
Yeah.
So, Krista, you've been doing this 12 years. Take a deep breath and reflect on this one. What's been your greatest joy?
So I would say, when God put a vision, Ben was only about 4 years old. And one morning I woke up, maybe it was morning, afternoon, and just as clear as a photograph, saw this farmstead community for adults with autism. But I thought Ben wouldn't need this level of support as an adult. And as time moved along, he did. And God was good to give that vision many years before he asked us to live into it. And I think the joy of it now is I prayed that God would lift autism.
Yeah.
For Ben, autism is different for all people, right?
Yeah.
For Ben, it is not gentle. And I ached as his mother that God would ask Ben to live in a body that I think sometimes is hard to live in. And I wanted him to be able to speak and express himself. And I wrestled over a loving God who would...
Yeah, that's when faith gets real, right?
Right. And it felt inconsistent with who I knew God to be. Yet I look at what God's now done through Ben's life. And, he has all the things I prayed for. He has belonging. He has purpose. He has a life that is bigger than just me and Dave. Um, we will die someday, and he
It's a
has a
community.
community. So I think some of the ache and the joy of this is I needed to surrender
Uh,
what my vision for what Ben's life needed to look like. And I needed to trust that God knew exactly. And so my greatest joy, that's a long answer,
It's
is
beautiful.
sometimes I'll come out of my office and I'll see Ben. He might be doing culinary, like he's learning to make meals, or he might be doing, I don't know, soap making or fitness or something awesome. And he's having his full day with people that he loves, and he sees me and he'll come over and he'll give me a little kiss. And then he turns me around very gently and gives me a nudge, like, "Go back to your office, mom." And I think, isn't that the most beautiful
Yeah.
thing? He's a 29-year-old man with his place of belonging, and I matter in it, but I'm not everything anymore, right?
Yeah.
So that's my greatest joy.
Look, I am so grateful that God gave you that vision. I mean, there's been a lot of years, and we've talked a lot through this in the past 12
Yeah,
years and
yeah,
more.
yeah.
But you have been an example of a good Samaritan in this community. You've seen those in need, and it's not just the individual, it's the whole family unit that you've given so much beautiful care and respite to.
Thank you.
And so if you've not been to Ben's Hope, I invite you to come take a look at Ben's Hope, especially a Sunday evening for
Yeah,
worship. You'll
it's
love
really
it. Is it
special.
at 6 o'clock?
6 o'clock every
6
Sunday.
o'clock and outdoors
Yep.
in the summertime under a beautiful tent. So please come take a look. But I would also invite you as a community, pick up your eyes. The person in front of you is the person that God's placed there for you to engage and to bless and to be concerned about, to see a fellow human who might have some need. So take that opportunity. And again, as you're watching in, please help spread the word, spread this through your YouTube channels, Facebook, whatever, but help get these stories out, because at Providence Threads, we're trying to weave stories of local community members who are living God's stories and weaving their stories with others. And that's what Providence Threads is all about. So thanks for joining in.